Welcome to Dateline Schools, a presentation of St. Clair County RESA, with your host, Chris Troy.
The City of Marysville is celebrating 100 years of being a community, and to help them celebrate, I decided to sit down with local historian TJ Gaffney to talk about some of the people and events who made the City of Marysville what it is today. TJ, thanks a lot for being with us this week.
Glad to do it, Chris.
So you're basically the St. Clair County Railroad guy when it goes. And with Marysville turning 100 this year, one of those railroad things that everybody knows about is the locomotive in the park. Can you tell us a little bit, how did that come to be?
The train that everybody knows kind of as the City Jungle Gym in Marysville Park was originally built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1923, so it's just a year older than Marysville, actually, and was built specifically to work in the Marysville power plant hauling coal cars in and out, and was part of an order of basically four identical sisters that were being used at other plants throughout Michigan.
How did it end up in Marysville Park?
Detroit Edison decided that when they were transferring from the steam locomotives to diesel, that some of these locomotives had such a connection to their communities that it would be a good idea to preserve them. And so 203 was given to Marysville as a way to remember both the steam locomotive area and the importance of Detroit Edison to the community.
Now, TJ, obviously you can't just lift up a train with a forklift and drive it in. How did that train get into the park?
Believe it or not, the locomotive actually ran right down from the power plant, and then the then Port Huron and Detroit Railway, which most people in Marysville would now know as CSX, their track crews actually built a special siding right into the park, and of course the last remnants of that siding are what the locomotive sits on. They then, when the locomotive dropped its fires for the very last time, they tore up the track back to the main, and there she's been ever since.
TJ, there's certain names that are just big when it comes to St. Clair County and in the city of Marysville, and one of those names is Garwood. Who was Garwood?
Garwood was a industrialist in the early 20th century who became synonymous with two very important things for growth of industry in the area. One was the development of technology such as the original mechanism for dump trucks, but more importantly, he's known for the construction of pleasure craft and for racing speedboats.
And did he have a plant there in Marysville? You always hear about Garwood and Algonac area and all that. What was his connection to Marysville?
When Gar began to look for a place to build his pleasure boats in mass, he came to Marysville because it had both a water connection. He needed the ability to test out his watercraft and the ability to move his craft around the country when they were sold. And so having that rail connection with the Port Huron and Detroit was very vital. And it also had a fairly excellent road system with M25 and M29 not too far away. So he built the plant here and began constructing boats very quickly in the 1920s.
Now, I know Garwood was also known for his race boats. Were those just regular marine engines that he built, or what was he using in those boats?
Gar was a unique character, and because he was kind of breaking the envelope, somewhat like an Evel Knievel or more modern race car drivers like a Jeff Gordon or what have you, he would actually use airplane engines, surplus airplane engines from the Packard Company, which were known as the Liberty engines that had been used in World War I aircraft. He actually set the world record at the time in the early 1930s with his boat Miss America 10 by taking 4 of those engines and placing them in a wood boat, and basically beat that record. And it was seen for many years as an impossible mark, but Gar was out to beat it.
TJ, what a lot of people don't know is that the railroad came a little bit even after the city of Marysville. You always think about the waterways and the railroads building communities, but that was something that came after Marysville was Marysville. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the railroad that most people know in Marysville today, which is now CSX Transportation, was an outgrowth of a industrial railroad that was built to the southern edge of the Port Huron city limits, known as the Port Huron and Southern, in the early 1900s. About the same time that C. Harold Wills began building the Wills St. Clair and Detroit Edison was building the Mighty Mo power plant, the Handy brothers of Bay City, Michigan, had purchased the Port Huron Southern with the idea of building down to the Detroit area and tapping some of the industry that was down there. They renamed the railroad the Port Huron and Detroit and began building down to Marine City, thereby connecting a lot of the new industrial areas of Marysville with the outside world. So at that point, Will St. Clair, Garwood, and several other entities had the ability to ship products out, but more importantly, Detroit Edison had a way to get coal into its power plant besides just the Great Lakes waterways.
TJ, how much of an impact did the Morton Salt Company, which a lot of people knew were there in Marysville, have on that railroad?
Morton was probably the second biggest customer that the Port Huron and Detroit had, so much so that when the decision was made to close Morton Salt in the early 1980s, and the Duffy family, who later purchased the Port Huron and Detroit, decided to sell the railroad, it greatly affected the impact of the price that Chessie System, which again is now CSX, gave the Duffy family for the railroad. They effectively lost one of their biggest customers in the process.
TJ, you can't talk about the city of Marysville without talking about C.H. Wills. Who was this gentleman, and what impact did he have on the city of Marysville?
C. Harold Wills was, at first and foremost, an inventor who saw himself as not just a worker or an employee, but as an innovator. To his credit, Henry Ford saw that in Wills as well, and the ability for Wills to do some amazing things that ultimately went into what we now know as both the Model T and Model A designs came directly out of C. Harold Wills. The biggest issue that Mr. Wills had was he wanted to produce a car that was a little bit higher end, and Henry Ford just wasn't really interested in doing that at the time, and so he decided to take some of the money that he had made from working there and actually at one point having a small share of the Ford company itself and construct his own company in the early 1920s known as the Wills St. Clair.
So Wills comes to Marysville and he finds basically a lot of woods. Mm-hmm. How does he move forward at that point?
What C. Harold Wills finds in essence the Vicksburg of the era is sort of a blank slate in a lot of ways. And so he decides that he's going to construct what literally is a company town. He wants a town that his workers want to live in, want to be a part of, and so he sees himself much more in the sense of both philanthropist as an employer. And so he's very, very concerned about creating an environment that his workers want to be in and continue to be in for, in his thought initially, generations to come.
TJ, earlier we talked about C.H. Wills and his dreamy plan for his community, but just how did he pull off providing services and housing for all his workers? I mean, just where did he find the resources to build streets and streets of homes for his workers?
Yeah, if you were looking to build, in essence, a company town in the time that C. Harold Wills was building things, there was a couple different entities that you could go to that had, in essence, standard kit homes. The one that's probably best known is, of course, the Sears Company, where you could literally order an entire house disassembled, and it was usually shipped to you by rail, and then you could build it. Well, in the case of someone like Harold Wills, he's not looking to buy one, he's looking to buy 24 of the same variety. And so for those who live in the Marysville area today, the older part of the state's area of streets, the reason that so many of those houses look very, very similar to each other is they were built to a standard design that you could quite literally shop out of a catalog.
Now, when we're talking about houses today, we're talking about the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But that really wasn't the case when you're talking about a kid home, was it?
No. You were looking to buy, in essence, in bulk, or the idea of the same. And so there was a much more or larger emphasis, particularly on C.O. Harold Wills' part, to make these homes affordable for his employees. And so the homes were looked at as smaller footprints, usually under about 1,200 square foot. Some were a little bit larger if, say, they were higher-end employees, but mostly he looked to build a set of homes where, you were very similar to what your neighbor had, but also it was something that was constructed in a quality way and was easy to maintain for the family owner.
Well, TJ, with Marysville turning 100 years old, there's all kinds of history to look back upon, and I appreciate you taking your time to sit down and share some of those stories with us.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
For Dateline Schools, I'm Chris Troy. Dateline Schools is a presentation of St. Clair County RESA.